Okay, so we want to start by setting our motivation. And I was reading a commentary the other day by Keston Sanford, sort of emphasized the need for the three sort of greatnesses. Can't remember the exact term he used, but about setting your motivation at the beginning, then doing the virtuous practice, and then dedicating the merits with the view of emptiness. So, because we're doing a Mahayana teaching, we'll set the motivation according to the Mahayana tradition. And we will not only think we're going to do these classes and study for our own benefits, but for the benefit of all sentient beings. And with that in mind, we'll recite some short prayers. And for that, we will start by visualizing Shakyamuni Buddha in the space in front, and then surrounded by the masters of India and Tibet, or the refuge tree, whichever you can kind of visualize, kind of do this according to your level. So, yeah, maybe depending sort of what your lineage is, you might want to visualize the Golok masters, the Shakya masters, or Nyingma, Kagyu, whichever tradition you follow. And visualize then you're also surrounded by all sentient beings who are there, you're going to lead them in the prayer. Think that they're with you, taking refuge and reciting these prayers. And with that thought, we'll start reciting the prayer. So we'll just do the short version like we often do. Start the praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha, know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha, know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Guru, teacher, Bhagavan, Tathagata, Arhat, perfectly complete Buddha, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, Siddhartha, know of the world, supreme guide of beings to be subdued, teacher of gods and humans, to you, Buddha Bhagavan, glorious conqueror Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. Tayatha Om Muni Muni Mahamunaye So Om Muni Muni Mahamunaye Soha Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Mahamunaye Soha. And then rather than reciting the entire Heart Sutra, we'll just recite the praise to the perfection, to Prajnaparamita. Masam Shomi Shiva Palshi Makemi Ganapke no Ni Zozo Rami Yishi Choyo wa Du Sum Yewa Yom Laja Selo Tayatha Om Gate Gate Pai Gate Pasam Gate Bodhi So Tayatha Om Gate Gate Pai Gate Pasam Gate Bodhi So Tayatha Om Gate Gate Pai Gate Pasam Gate Bodhi So. Then we'll do a short mandala and refuge. Sashivoki Yoshin Meto Tvamiraglingji Nihile. 见报。 Sangye Shiru Mixi Uwai Dvoguna Rajila Chobasho Inam Gu Namandala Kaniratayami Sangye Chodam Sani Chodam La Chanchu Padu Dagni Kyamsuchi Dagi June Gipe Sonamgi Drola Pinshi Sangye Duka Sho Sangye Chodam Sani Chodam La Chanchu Padu Dagni Kyamsuchi Dagi Chunye Gipe Sonamgi Drola Pinshi Sangye Duka Sho Sangye Chodan Soni Chodam La Jancho Badu Dagi Kyapsuchi Dagi Chonyin Gipe Sonamgi Drola Pinchi Sangye Drupa Sho. And with that, well, you okay there, Jack? So I'll make a start, and this week we're going to talk about the sort of next topic in the text that we're based on. So we're following along with the foundational qualities. So this week we're up to sort of the bit on karma. So for now we've done the first verse, the foundation of all good qualities is a kind of perfect guru. But yeah, the foundation of all good qualities is a kind of perfect guru. Correct devotion to him is a root of the path, but clearly seeing this and applying great effort. Please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. And then we've covered precious human rebirth on the understanding that this precious freedom to rebirth is found only once. Difficult, greatly meaningful and difficult to find again. Please message remind me to unceasingly day and night takes its essence. Then the third verse, or the third topic, is covered in the next verse of this life is impermanent as a waterfall. Remember how quickly it decays and death comes. And in the second half of this verse, it says, after death, just like the shadow follows the body, the results of black and white karma follow. So that leads us on to today's topic, karma. So, for today's information, I went around a few different sources and found a few different outlines, and the outlines all tend to say the same thing. So I checked the Where's My Precious Teacher, the Longchen Yingti commentary by Great Master Nyingma Patrol Rinpoche. But I've also checked against a few other texts like the Middle Length Lam Rim, the Lam Rim Chenmo, and they all rely on the same outline series. And the sort of main outlines covered are one is the definiteness of karma, and then two is the non-virtue, the 10 non-virtues, and the third is the 10 virtuous actions. So they're all they're all covering the same material in really the same order. So that's the order we're going to follow today. So the first outline was sort of generic, the main outline of what karma is. So there's a few kind of texts here, and I think Lama Tsongkhapa describes it very well in the Foundational Qualities. Also in chapter 3 of Jigme Lingpa's The Treasure of Precious Qualities, in verse 1 it says, those who travel thus to future lives attain them high or low, as though bound by rope, drawn only by their virtuous deeds or ingrained evil ways. The relative, the all-concealing truth is inescapable. So what is really clear here is Jigme Lingpa is saying karma is unavoidable. You know, in the Dujon Tursa short yonder, It says, Geki Dike Dike Lundame. So it means that virtue. Yeah. Gedik Leki Gunde Duame. Beneficial and harmful actions bring their inevitable results. So all of the teachings emphasize how karma is certain and there's no escaping this. So we want to think, okay, we're thinking karma is definite. But what more beyond that? So we need to then consider the kind of main 4 points here. So the first one, karma is definite. We've seen that. And virtually is so this means it's definite in its result. A virtuous karma results in a positive result. Non-virtuous karma has a non-virtuous result. So that's the first point. And the second point is that karma constantly increases. With every moment, while we have this mind of ignorance, we generate karma. Every moment produces more karma. So every moment it constantly increases. It's like a snowball rolling down a hill. It starts off quite small and ends up, depending on the size of the hill, being massive. This is why it's important to control our mind and tame negative karma. Because if we're not careful and we keep doing negative actions, it won't just be a small piece of one-off negative karma experience, but this massive snowball of negative karma. 3, one will never experience a karmic result one did not create the causes for. So everything you experience is the result of a previous action. You can't take someone else's karma onto you, and you can't give your own karma away. The Buddhas cannot wash it away for you. It's all very definite. You will experience what you created the causes for. In the same way that if you plant a barley seed, you won't grow a potato. Or if you plant the flowers for roses, you won't have tulips grow. It's in a sequence of events. So the explanations of karma vary ever so slightly between the schools, and the sort of Madhyamika explanations the rarest to find. It's also the most profound, one of the more complicated ones. But to put briefly, what we're saying is an action creates an effect instantly, but it doesn't mean that's the ripened effect. This can pass on moment by moment until it eventually meets the causes to be fully ripened and you experience the result of that karma. So this then links to the fourth one, that karmic causes created and never lost. So even if you do purification practice, you still experience negative karma. You can do 100,000 Vajrasattva, 100,000 prostrations, dancing doji kadro, any kind of practice. But you'll still experience the karma. What's different when you do purification practice is the intensity. So it's often said that some people have had the karma to die, but because of killing in so many previous lifetimes, they've had the karma that would cause them to die very young. But because they've met the Dharma and practiced so diligently, they've purified this negative karma. And it's not caused them to die young, but instead it caused them to be incredibly sick. So you can mitigate the effects, but not avoid them entirely. So there's a quote by Lama Tsongkhapa. It says, if you knew how hard it is to acquire, living the average life will be impossible. If you saw its great benefits, you would be sorry if it stayed meaningless. If you thought about death, you would make preparations for your future lives. If you thought about cause and effect, you would stop being reckless. So here's Lama Tsongkhapa is kind of covering what we've talked about in previous weeks as well. This first verse, what he's saying is hard to acquire is this precious human rebirth. If you saw its great benefits, again, he's talking about the human life and making it meaningful. He thought about death, talking about meditating on death and impermanence. And finally, those final points, if you thought about cause and effect, you stop being reckless. Most of the time, we don't think about the results of our actions. We just do what feels best for us in the right moment. Yeah, I'll send them in the group. So, yeah, it feels as though what we want is very reckless. We know we do what we want, and we're often very reckless. We don't pause and think, okay, so I go for a run today, and then what will that do? Oh, well, I'll do this, but then I'll be tired later and I won't be able to do that. We don't think like this. We just think, oh, I'll go for a run today. Oh, I'll do this. But if you then consider much more carefully about karma, you'd avoid a lot of the negativities that we all carry out. So then, sort of the divisions of karma, we'll briefly think about. So, karma is either virtuous or non-virtuous. Virtue leads to happiness, non-virtue leads to suffering. But then within these types of karma, you have throwing and completing karma. So throwing karma is a karmic imprint and has a potential to throw you into one of the six realms at the time of death. That's why it's throwing karma. It's what causes rebirth. In completing karma is when you don't have all four conditions for a complete karmic act. You don't have the intent, the object, the action, and the rejoicing kind of aspect, which we'll come on to in a little bit. And so it doesn't have the power to throw you in particular realms, but it completes the circumstances around that throwing karma. So it causes pleasant or unpleasant experiences in accordance with its reality, or in accordance with its nature. So then when we talk about virtue and non-virtue, you maybe think, well, are they all equal? Are they the same? Is all virtue equal? Is all non-virtue equal? But then we say different actions have different karmic weights. And looking with heaviness by the nature of the object, of the action, killing is much more heavy than telling a lie. It's just kind of logical. There's certain acts that are much worse than others. Then there's the heaviness according to the basis. Sorry, the heaviness according to the object. So if you harm a Buddha or a Bodhisattva, it's so much worse than harming an ordinary sentient being. And that's because a Buddha and a Bodhisattva has so much potential to benefit sentient beings. And if you stop them doing that, it's so much worse for sentient beings. Then there's the heaviness according to your intention. And so if you have a good motivation, if you commit virtue with the motivation of bodhicitta, you accumulate so much more merit than if you commit a virtuous action with the motivation of individual liberation. And then there's the heaviness according to the action involved, which is kind of related to the nature. And there's the heaviness according to the frequency, because karma accumulates every time you commit that action. So if you just meditate on bodhicitta once, you don't generate as much merit as if you meditate on bodhicitta every day. And then the heaviness according to your non-virtue being without any opponent. So if you don't generate the four opponent powers, your non-virtue is greater than if you committed a non-virtuous action and then generated the four opponent powers. It's still there, but it's less than when you've purified it. So then if we consider the sort of other the other outlines, the 10 virtues and the 10 non-virtues, and we can kind of condense this into one. The 10 virtues are the opposite of the 10 non-virtues. So we'll go through the 10 non-virtues first, that was to be avoided. And then we'll quickly go over the virtues, but you'll see the similar. So before we really get into these 10 to be specific, you need to think about the four four factors that are necessary for a karmic action to be complete. For a complete karma, you need these four components. And the first one's the basis, sort of what this object of the action. The second is the intention, the mind you have prior to committing the action. And this intention is split into three again. The recognition, where you recognize the object you're going to commit the action to. The motive, sort of the reasoning for it. And the delusion, because all karma is generated in ignorance. Once you've realized emptiness and you're an arhat, a bodhisattva or a Buddha, you do not generate karma. So in that way, you don't have this second factor to be complete. And then back to the four factors. The third factor is the deed, the actually performing of the action. And the fourth is the completion of the action. And this comes up in certain non-virtues quite often. So then the non-virtues can be divided. The 10 can be divided into three categories based of the basis. So there are three non-virtues of the body. There are four non-virtues of speech and three non-virtues of mind. So if you start with the body, you have the non-virtue of killing, stealing, and sexual misconduct. So if you go through the four, if we go through the four factors for each, killing, the basis is another being. The intention, so the recognition is the person you want to kill. The motivation is the intention to kill. And the delusion is whichever sort of delusion motivates you, whether it's anger, aversion, ignorance. You could say anger because someone has offended you and is rage, you kill them, or sort of you can even say attachment because you kill an animal because you attach the taste of the meat, or ignorance because some people think killing an animal and offering it to a god or a spirit is going to lead them to enlightenment. And their motivation for killing is based on ignorance. The deed is the act of killing. It doesn't. The Lama text is quite interesting, and it sort of shows a bit of culture because they say the killing is by some means, e.g., directly or indirectly. So by yourself, or you order someone to kill someone. So if a king hires a soldier to kill someone else for him, he still accumulates the karma of killing. Which is why it's very dangerous for world leaders, because they declare war and then accumulate so much karma of killing. And then it also specifies here it can be a weapon, it can be poison, it can be black magic. So there's a fairly interesting, some interesting cultural points there. And then finding the completion. So the being that you killed has to die before you die for the completion to be complete. So it's said that suicide doesn't have a complete karma because there's some debate around whether its completion is actually fulfilled, because the object is yourself and the person committing the action, yourself, are dying simultaneously. So it's not really complete before you die. But then there's also some stories told of people that, in a battle, kill someone. Before the person that they stab with a spear has time to die, they're killed. To answer your question about Tenzin, if you think in this way, the king accumulates the negative karma of all the killing that happens in the war. If he's told that, let's say a hypothetical, he has an army of 1,000 people and each one kills one person. He has the karma of killing 1,000 people. But each individual soldier only has the karma of killing one person, because that's all they've done. They might wish other people to have died. That comes into other actions. But in this case, it's only them. So then the second killing, so its basis is belonging, something of value belonging to another. And so its intention, so you recognize the object, you set the intention to steal, and the delusion is with three poisons: anger, attachment, ignorance, whichever you feel like. And then the deed is complete by stealing. And the completion is by now, it's complete when you think this now belongs to me. So it's quite interesting because when we say it's an item of value, one method is cheating. That is the most common form of stealing in terms of karma. Because if a shopkeeper, if he was trying to overcharge people, that would be the karma of stealing. Or if a tax collector overclaimed, that seemed to be quite common in Tibet. There are certain termas that talk about how to keep tax collectors away and stop them taking too much money from you. Um, so, the kind of conning people and they're saying the king wants 15 gold coins, but in fact the king only wants 10, but they're keeping 5 for themselves. They've stolen 5. Then the third of body is sexual misconduct. So we won't talk about ordained people because, well, for monastic, any sexual activity is sexual misconduct and breaks the vows, and it's negative. For a layperson, it's slightly more nuanced. So there's improper time, improper place, improper partner, and sort of improper time includes frequency. So I was reading Launching Nintik and non-road commentary by Ketsun Sanpo Rinpoche the other day. And he made an interesting point that it's clarified in some texts that if it says, most of them are written for men, so it says it's sexual misconduct if you insist on having sex when your wife says no. So it's a relatively modern aspect here. These kind of attitudes are quite forward thinking in the West about marital rape, rape in a marriage, or whether a wife can be raped by a husband. I think in the UK it's only been illegal for 40 years or so. Ketsun Sangpo Rinpoche, I'll send you a message of it, Tenzin. He was a great Nyingma master. He was very realized. But yeah, so we can say place, in a temple, those kind of things in proper time when when the woman's on a period, uh, when a woman doesn't want to, when immediately after childbirth is one, or either side of childbirth, actually, it says too close to childbirth and too soon after childbirth because it's bad for the woman's health. So interestingly, these commentaries do even specify it's for the health of the woman as well. So some of them are quite interesting in this way. They're very forward thinking. And they're also very aware of the health issues around times of the month and so on, and risks of diseases. Yeah, and then different commentaries talking about partner, they kind of have different answers here, and some are very cultural, about they say improper age, and some are specific about ages and some aren't, and some you have to consider the time. These texts, some of them were written 1,000 years ago when they talk about when they've got to be over 14. Whereas now the realistic commentaries say, a lot of the modern masters say, okay, the text says 14, but when the life expectancy was lower, that was sort of average. So you can take it as age of consent now, wherever you're based. But this is then like improper partner, so if they're married to someone else, if they've taken the 1 day vows, if they're a nun, if they're a monk, if they just say no. Um, there's a lot of the commentaries place a lot of emphasis on consent, which is a very interesting point. It was I was in this commentary and it really emphasized the importance of consent. And this was based off, it was all the commentary given in the 80s, but it was based off a written text by Jumi Famimchi, so late 1800s. And then, yeah, sort of, then the improper orifice gets mentioned, and again, these are contextual when they talk about whether anal sex is wrong or not, and different lamas say different things. And the main emphasis is not to harm the other person. So if you think 500 years ago, it was a bit different to now. There was a lot more health risks associated with sex in general. So you have to kind of be mindful about what the modern world's like, and there are certain things you can do now that you couldn't in the past. But you can kind of see the main emphasis on sexual misconduct is not to harm the other person. And then sort of you need the intention for sexual misconduct. You have the recognition. There's a bit of debate on what you recognize. So some say you recognize the object, the person you're going to have sex with, or commit sexual misconduct with. Some say you must acknowledge, but must be aware the act is sexual misconduct. Yeah, I think both kind of make sense, but maybe more to me, I have always understood it to be the object is the person you're going to commit this act with. The motive is the intention to engage in sexual activity. Then the delusion, anger, attachment, ignorance. The Lamrim text I've got here actually says, so out of anger, you see this in war, especially in the past, in war, people would rape uh, women in areas that they've overtaken. And you see this, that be based on anger. And then the deed is the actual act of whatever sexual misconduct is being committed. And then the completion it's said that you experience bliss, that you experience orgasm. But I think, again, it depends on what kind of sexual misconduct is being carried out, whether that's true. But I don't think you need to be too specific about this. It's exactly like this. And there's a bit of flexibility to be had. You can kind of see so far with the body, it's quite simple. Killing is really obvious and really simple to understand. You either kill someone or you don't. It's non-virtue if you kill someone. Stealing is really obvious. You're taking what isn't yours. Sexual misconduct is quite simple. It's something like a sexual act that harms another person. And that's the body. And for speech, you have lying. So the lying, you have to have the basis of another person who understands you, and you speak. Sorry, no. Another person who can understand you and can speak is the basis. So the intention, you must know what you're saying is a lie. You set out to tell this lie. You have your delusion. Then the deed is done by lying. It can be speaking, it can be gesturing, facial expressions, writing something down that's a lie, or even remaining silent. If they say stay, they might say speak up if you know this, or stay silent. These kind of ways that you're lying still by not speaking. Then the deed is done by this lie, and then the completion is you need someone else to understand and believe your lie. So if you tell a lie but no one believes you because it's so ridiculous, it's clearly a lie, you've committed the non-virtue of lying, and you have this completing karma of lying, but you don't have the throwing karma of lying. Does that make sense? Then the second speech is divisive speech or slander. So it involves you need two other people. The basis is two other people, and then the intention is you think, okay, I'm going to slander one of these people to the other, and the deed is caused by doing that. It applies to both friends and enemies. So if two people are friends and you cause problems and you say to one, the other's been saying bad things about you and cause them to split, that is divisive speech. But if there are two enemies that are maybe thinking about reconciling, and you go to one and say the other's not going to reconcile with you because he's saying this about you, that too is divisive speech because you have pushed them further apart. And it's completed when both parties understand and believe you, and they're hostile to each other again, or hostile to each other. Then the third speech is in harsh speech. So it's harming the feelings of another person intentionally. So the basis is another person whose feelings are being hurt. And it says here, so we can express insulting words to a non-human, and you'll have a completing karma there because it's not a complete action. But it's a complete this basis is complete if they understand the words and are hurt by them. And then the deed is this speaking with negative intention to hurt someone. And the completion when the other person understands and is upset. So, you might think people speak harshly to friends. You see it a lot, especially in the UK. People speak quite harshly to each other, but they're not offended. So it's not a completed karma. It's not a throwing karma. And in fact, it's not necessarily, in this sense, divisive speech. Because if you consider, it's not harsh speech. Because if you consider the basis, okay, it's another person whose feelings could be hurt. That's complete. The intention, where you recognize you're speaking to a person, but there could be a friend. Your motive, you're going to speak these words, and you kind of have the delusion. So you've got the basis and the intention. But then the deed, you speak words pointing out the fault to someone, whether true or not, in a hurtful manner, or you get someone else to speak hurtful words on your behalf. It's kind of, sometimes in the UK, people speak to each other in what looks like a harsh way from the outside, but it's meant in a friendly, caring way between them, and the other person is aware of this. So this is why you can't judge other people's karma. You don't know exactly what's going on in their mind. You don't know what's going on in the other person's mind. You just watch your own mind. The final non-virtue of speech is idle gossip. So it's just talking about something you treat it as important. You just chat about it all the time. You just, you're just people like to hear the sound of their own voice sometimes. They can't be content in silence. They just like to say something. It's this kind of idle speech. And one of my teachers always says, in a technical sense, any conversation not about Dharma counts as idle gossip. But you can't live in the world like that. If you're living in, especially in the West, even in Nepal and India, you have to speak to people who aren't Buddhist. You can't just talk about the Dharma 24/7. So, from a Mahayana perspective, you have to, my teacher said it's really important we're normal people still. Because if people think Buddhists are really weird and not normal, they'll be less inclined to have any interest. But if people see you as a normal person and see the benefits of the practice, they might join. So it's these, as a Mahayana practitioner, you want to encourage people to practice the Dharma. So you might just gossip with them over tea and whatever. Well, talking to non-Buddhists about non-Dharmic things is still idle speech. It's just beneficial sometimes. You know, it's kind of part of being in samsara. We generate non-virtue non-stop. Um, you see the great masters, some of them do never speak about anything that's not Dharma. They never engage in idle gossip. So it's good to kind of train in reducing how much you engage in it, especially in a Dharma context. If you're in a retreat or and you're not engaged in silence, you're talking during the retreat, or you're in a Dharma center attending teachings in the breaks. It's good to talk about the Dharma rather than the news or anything. A big one in the UK is the weather. People talk about the weather, just feel silence. It's not harmful, it's just a bit of a waste of time. And we'll come on to the results in a little bit. So then the final ones are the three of mind. So you have covetedness. So it's desiring an object, a possession, a quality of another person. So as much as we talk about qualities, it can be beneficial. You can think you want someone's good qualities. That's not this non-virtuous mind. Here is like, it's in a train of thought. Some examples that out of anger, you want to buy something before someone you dislike has a chance to buy it. So let's say you go into a shop and there's only one of, you're in a bakery and there's only one cake left. And someone you dislike's behind you in the queue and you hear them saying how much they want that cake. And because you dislike them so much, you think, I want to get to them. So I'll buy that cake even though I don't want it. That's that complete. Or another example is out of attachment, wanting to possess many things, thinking they bring happiness. You just want things because you think they're going to make you happy. Or out of ignorance, wanting to buy many things, thinking it's good for yourself or as a habit. Some people just buy things without thinking because they're just so used to shopping. It's not really a good use of time or money. But this is about the thoughts. So it's in this case, in this context, it's thinking about wanting another object. And this non-virtue is complete when you decide to make that object yours. So the moment you think I'll buy that cake to stop my enemy getting it, that's the non-virtue complete. Even if you don't go ahead and buy the cake, you've still committed that non-virtue of mind. Then the second non-virtue of mind is harmful intent or ill will. So it's another being who would be hurt if you acted on these harmful thoughts. You don't have to do this harmful action to incur the negative karma, just harmful thoughts about another person. Wishing harm on someone else. That's a really common example. I think lots of people go through that in life. They wish harm on someone. And that's why it's really important we train our mind to avoid these. And then the final one's wrong view. So the 10th non-virtue is wrong view. I mean, there's kind of different wrong views. There's these sort of relative ones about karma, Four Noble Truths, those kind of ones, or even just holding the wrong view. Kind of in this we say wrong view has multiple meanings. Believing 2 + 2 is 3 would be a wrong view. But it's not the wrong view we're talking about here. We're just talking about karma, like sort of things that influence reality and how you behave. So karma, emptiness, Four Noble Truth, those kind of things. And it's complete when you deny its existence. So it's just thinking about it. If you deny karma, it's non-virtue. You don't have to tell anyone or express that, but just mentally deny it. It's okay to doubt and have queries. I'm not sure whether rebirth's true. Maybe were you reborn when you die, maybe you're not. Those kind of things are okay. But if you're set in when you die, that's the end. There's no rebirth. That's wrong view. Because also it's on what's constructive for the mind. If you totally deny the existence of karma, you don't think virtue leads to happiness and non-virtue leads to suffering. So you'll go out, you won't care about your actions, you'll just commit non-virtue. So what difference does it make? So it's really important to be careful here on these 10 non-virtues. So very quickly before we sort of come to an end, we'll go over the results. So you can think of the three kind of results. These are ripened results similar to the cause and environmental results. The main ones will focus just on the ripened results. So the first, we'll go through the 10 in order again. So starting with killing. The ripened result is rebirth in the lower realms. And then sort of results similar to the cause. You'll have short life, ill health, problems. You'll have a habitual desire to kill. And then the environmental results are taking place with lots of violence and war and other issues. And then for stealing, again, the ripened results rebirth in the lower realms. The result similar to the cause is poverty and an instinct to steal. And the environmental result is taking rebirth in a kind of barren place, where crops struggle to grow. There's lots of hail, business fails, and so on. Then for sexual misconduct, again, the ripened results rebirth in the lower realms. Then results similar to the cause, you're talking about you struggle to maintain good relationships. You'll split from partners soon. And you have the tendency to commit sexual misconduct. And then the environmental result is having to live in a dirty place. So then on to speech, sort of lying. The ripened result is the same. It's rebirth in the lower realms. Similar to the cause is people generally don't believe you. No matter whether what you say is true or false, they don't believe you because they associate you with lying. And the environmental results having to live with amongst people who cheat, and you struggle to find people who are trustworthy. Divisive speech. Sorry. So divisive speech, once again, the ripened results rebirth in the lower realms. The results similar to the cause are you're lonely, you struggle to have good relationships, good friendships. You have the tendency to cause disunity again. Then the environmental results, you have to live in a kind of rugged inhospitable environment. It's also really hard to generate meditative concentration. People, in communities who experience lots of divisive speech and people who cause friction, they struggle to then meditate on calm abiding and do well. I'm not necessarily sure on the exact karmic reasoning behind this, but it's something I've noticed in my life, in my time in Dharma centers. People who cause problems generally struggle to practice meditation well. And it's something a few of my teachers have commented on as well. It's really important, especially in Dharma communities, we avoid divisive speech. Because you're preventing other people from, if you split nuns and monks and nuns and the Sangha up, you prevent them from getting together and generating great merit. And that's kind of a major problem for you. So harsh speech, the life and result again is rebirth in the lower realms. The result's similar to the cause, so people will speak harshly to you. Even when you speak pleasantly to people, people think you're speaking harshly. People who are sarcastic all the time, when the genuine people struggle to believe they're genuine, they think they're being sarcastic again. Then, you create these habits. The more you speak harshly, the more likely you are to do it again. And then your environmental results, living in a place where there are many tree stumps, brambles, nettles, sharp rocks, thorns. Then idle gossip. So we have rebirth in the lower realms again is the ripened result. The result is similar to the cause, that people will not take you seriously, they won't listen to you. And you have this habit of just talking to fill any quiet moment. And you do see this, if there's someone who just waffles on about anything all the time and just speaks because they feel like it, everyone tends to ignore them, even if they're saying something important. So if you aim to share the Dharma with people, it's good not to do this because they'll just stop listening to whenever you speak, and then they won't hear the Dharma. And the environmental results are having to live in a place where crops don't grow properly, the rains at the wrong time, just things aren't successful. And then in terms of mind, this covetousness, this extreme desire, the ripened results of rebirth in the lower realms, results similar to a cause. You'll be unable to achieve your aims, and you have this constant grasping. And environmental results are living in a place where crops are poor and material resources are easily lost. Then the harmful intent, so the ripened results rebirth in the lower realms. The result similar to the cause is you're a person who's easily frightened and panicky, and you have the habit to hurt others and generate. Because if you're always thinking about wishing harm on someone, it's really easy then just to actually harm them. Once you think about doing it enough, you eventually do the action. And then the environmental results are living in a violent place with lots of war and contagious diseases. So it's kind of related to killing and harming others because eventually you're going to actually do the killing and harming others. And then finally, wrong views. The ripened result is rebirth in the lower realms. The result similar to the cause is being ignorant of correct views. You have difficulty attaining realizations and correcting your wrong views. And you tend to draw these wrong views again and again. And the environmental results, having to live in a place where there are shortages of water and other resources, especially precious things such as Dharma, scriptures, spiritual guides. So you can kind of see that the 10 non-virtues and their results. And you can check in the middle length lamrim, I think, and the lamrim chenma, the 10 virtues, because we don't really have time to go over them all. But in essence, they're the exact opposite. The virtue that opposes wrong view is fight fear. The virtue that opposes lying is telling the truth. But most texts just focus on these 10 non-virtues because these are the key ones with what to avoid. And by avoiding them, you carry out the 10 virtues. So yeah, that kind of covers we haven't covered the third outline of the 10 virtues and the results, but in essence, you can receive that from the 10 non-virtues. So we've covered those main outlines. The first being, the nature of karma, the second being the non-virtues. And then what we think basically to end is you meditate on these points again and again, thinking through how karma is definite, how it's increasing, and then contemplate the 10 non-virtues and their results, and then sort of set the final thought of, I need to abandon these non-virtues. So Nagarjuna says all actions of body, speech, and mind created with an attitude of greed, hatred, and ignorance lead to suffering. For while actions created with the opposite attitudes of love, compassion, and wisdom, only happiness comes. So you can see all the 10 non-virtues, the motivation was greed, hatred, or ignorance. So Nagarjuna is saying the same thing as we've covered all along. You set a positive motivation of bodhicitta, and everything becomes virtue. You know, you can think about the kind of minds, if you kind of study Loic in the minds of mental factors, there are virtuous minds, non-virtuous minds, and change. Or in these mental factors, there are virtuous, non-virtuous, and changeable. And Ling Rinpoche gave a good example of a changeable one is the sleeping mind, because it can be virtue, non-virtue, or neutral. If you meditate on bodhicitta right before you go to sleep, and you go to sleep with a mind of bodhicitta, thinking how you're working to benefit all sentient beings and you're resting to, you're going to rest so you can have energy tomorrow to benefit sentient beings, then that mind of sleep becomes virtue. But if you go to sleep thinking about how you want to kill someone or how you want to steal something tomorrow, then it becomes a non-virtue. And if you kind of just go to sleep not thinking about anything like that, you know, you're just exhausted, you fall straight asleep, it's a bit neutral. And Ling Rinpoche really emphasized meditating on bodhicitta as you fall asleep, of emptiness, either the two basically, because it changes it into a virtuous mental factor. And he kind of said, you have 24 hours in the day, you sleep for about 10 hours of the day. So there's 10 hours of virtue you can accumulate by doing a brief meditation before going to sleep. It takes a lot of effort to generate 10 hours of merit while you're awake, so it's much easier to do it when you're asleep. So, yeah, that kind of concludes today's talk of what we want to cover. If there's any questions before we finish. Yeah, so you're right that Tenzin Gyatso Nanak really emphasizes this as well. Most of the lineage lamas do actually. And the difference to Jamyang Lama, the difference between karma and merit. Um, Merit is punya and really refers to positive, virtuous karma, positive karma. In terms of anything beyond that, I'm not 100% sure. But to me, merit is virtual, is positive karma. But it's just a sort of subdivision, I suppose. And then, sort of to conclude, as we discussed before, you have to start by setting your motivation of virtue, and you have to carry out your virtue, and then you have to dedicate. So we'll dedicate using these prayers. May whatever virtue I have collected benefit the teachings in all migratory beings, and in particular may it cause the essence of perfect pure love and rapid teachings to shine forever. Gangwei Rawe always in so Pendan Dewa Malu Yongwei Ne Chenre Ze Wang Tenzing Yaso Yi Shape Site Badu Teng Yu Chi. 장초 semcho rinpoche make panam kegyu chi kepan yampa mepa yang gonye gongdu pelwa sho tongni tawa rinpoche make panam kegyu chi kepan yampa mepa yang gonye gongdu pelwa sho. As long as space remains, as long as migrators remain, till may too remain to dispel the suffering of all migrators. And just briefly think that the act, the virtue we're dedicating, the act of dedicating, and the aim we dedicate towards two are all empty of inherent existence, and therefore in the nature of cause and effect, not necessarily come true. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.